You're listening to The Art of the Horseman, a podcast for equestrians who know that true horsemanship goes far beyond the arena. At the heart of this journey, horses teach us who we truly are, revealing what's possible when we let go of control, lead with love, and allow ourselves to be transformed from the inside out. Around here, horsemanship is lifemanship. And every conversation is a celebration of the ways horses help us grow into who we were meant to be. I am really excited because today we are here with Deanna Montero, and she's going to talk about her unique approach to helping people in their horsemanship journey. And the way she starts people on their journey is through understanding the horse through sculpture and learning how to sculpt the anatomy of the horse as you're learning about the horse. And she's able to do this online, which I think is really cool. And then in for doing that, it makes you a much better rider, trainer, and partner to your horse because you're actually able to understand how the biomechanics of the horse works. And this is such an important thing that's oftentimes missed, I feel. So welcome, Deanna. So if you could share just a little bit about your story.
So I got started teaching anatomy. I'm a professional sculptor, and I started. I had my horse since he was a baby. So my story kind of goes back to that time. I got him when he was 4 months old. I was 16. It was an Andalusian dream, dream come true. That journey lasted a long time. He was 15, and I ended up sending him back to the breeder because I have my family now, and I'm dedicating more to teaching and really being able to provide for him what he deserves and what he needs. Is at the moment I'm not able, so that he's in a beautiful place right now. But my journey started with him, and I learned about anatomy to help him after I had put him in training. Came back to me and he had some major issues. He didn't want to be ridden. He didn't want to be groomed. So I started looking into how I might be able to help him. And I started, I had been sculpting for a long time, sculpting horses. And I started to think, well, I'd like to learn more anatomy. I'd like to know more about it and understand, more in depth the conversations that I have with my veterinarian, how I might be able to, communicate better what I'm seeing and feeling and maybe understand my horse better. So I started sculpting the skeletal form, the musculoskeletal structures and everything. And I actually was able to find a path that led directly to his healing through my understanding of the anatomy, building it in the clay, which is, a three-dimensional way of understanding. So it's pretty real, apart from like working with the actual skeletal pieces that we dissecting or whatever, perhaps not something that everybody would like to do. So it's a nice option. So you can build every structure and every form and really understand it at a very fine detail level. So as I started doing that, I was searching for different methods, different training methods, different ways to build his muscles and try and help him heal in certain parts of his body because I could tell, things hurt and I wanted to ride, but he wasn't enjoying it. So I wanted us both to have that enjoyment, not just force him to do what I wanted, or force him to give me what I wanted. I wanted him to enjoy himself as well. So when I started to really see results, about 2.5 years of really studying, applying, and working with him, I was able to start riding him again. He was really, communicating and happy, excited to be with me. It was just a completely, 360 turnaround. And I started to, before that, I was kind of observing other riders and their relationships with their horses and the things that they talked about, they struggled with, that were just so similar to my struggles and the things that I saw with my horse and things I wanted to, improve or heal or whatever. So then I started to think, well, I think this information is just too good to keep to myself. And I wanted to try and figure out a way that I could bring it to as many equestrians as possible. And online seemed to be one of the ways that I could do that internationally. So I started filming the anatomy in clay so that I could offer it on through courses online, and people could start learning the skeletal structure, the muscular structure, and then talk about biomechanics, even though a sculpture, of course, doesn't move, but we can understand the biomechanics from the way that things fit together and the consequences of, perhaps the development under certain patterns that we might have in training or over years. So there's lots of different ways that the uh, the student can learn, even though they're not directly interacting with the horse through the clay. And then that's transferred to, okay, well, I can make connections now. I understand the back is built, a certain way, and the horse needs to be able to lift his back so that he can support the rider. And then just having that mental picture and that understanding of how the muscles are developed, you can ask the horse to do things that are healthy for his body rather than the opposite that causes long-term damage. So that that's pretty much the story in terms of what brought me to what I'm doing now.
That's fantastic. And I think it's a huge piece of the puzzle. I mean, understanding the body and how the horse's body and how it works, it's similar to ours, but it's also very different. And in order for people to really see when they're riding the things that they'd actually like to be seeing and to know the why and the how behind it, they've got to get some understanding of how all of these pieces fit together. And what a wonderful way to do it, because it's so hands-on. It's aesthetic. You're able to actually work with all of the little pieces. And I would imagine you do it. Do you do it in like layers, or how do you okay, tell us a bit about the process, because I think that'd be really interesting.
Yeah. So I teach them to sculpt the skeleton first, right? And so this is actually a tutorial I'm putting together right now. It's going to be available pretty soon.
Okay.
And I teach them just with nothing. We start with a ball of tinfoil, and then we sculpt the bones over it. And I talk about different bones and how they fit together, and things like the jaw, for instance, how it's sensitive when the horse, and if it gets damaged, what happens to the body, how it might affect the back, and all of those kinds of things. So I go into it not into a whole lot of detail because it's just a skull, but I do talk about that while I'm sculpting. And then I also do, the other layers. So in this particular one where I talk about the foot, I use a different colored clay for the different layers. It's a lot of fun. I love it. And I think it's a great way to retain the information because, like you said, it's tactile, it's kinesthetic. And so because you're building it, you have not only the opportunity to, shape it and feel it, but you're kind of taking your time. You're building that, and it takes time to do it. So you're thinking about that one piece for a while. So it kind of ingrains pretty quickly. The other part that a lot of people don't realize is that there's a lot of feel that's involved in sculpting too, which transfers directly to riding, right? It's not only about anatomy, it's about learning how you're using your hands and how you're using your body as well while you're sculpting so that you can achieve what you want in the clay. And if once you internalize that idea and those techniques, you can transfer that to, not only your hands, how you're using your hands with the reins, but also how you're using the rest of your body in the saddle. So it's a lot more abstract, technique that you learn from sculpting, but it's definitely applicable.
It's so neat because I wouldn't have thought that you would be bringing both the mental mindfulness, kind of be present states, which is required in this, as well as the feel. I mean, these are all such important things that we need to work on away from the horse. So what a perfect way to do it. Yeah, what a perfect way to do it through sculpture and through understanding the anatomy of the horse.
Mhm.
And I'm sure people are astonished at how, like, something small up here at the head clearly affects all the way back to that last vertebra on the tail, and how interconnected that all is.
And you mentioned
Yeah,
the feel, using feel as well. So this is, a chance for them to sit there. I'm sure that people can close their eyes sometimes and feel clay. But I mean, it's different than just seeing a video or a picture or having somebody say, oh, look at the horse, it's stretching through its back. Now you're actually like in there.
Yeah.
And like you said, they take time to like process. So that's because humans, we're not very patient.
Yeah.
So by having that clay there, it's like we feel like, we're doing something, right? So I love it. And right now, are you finding more and more people are doing this since they're at home? How's that going for you?
Yes. There's a lot of people that are very interested in it. It's a great opportunity because I don't know what the situation is. I'm sure it's different everywhere, but we have, with COVID-19 going on right now, a lot of owners that actually can't see their horses. So the barns are closed. The trainers and the grooms are taking care of the horses. So it's a great opportunity for people to stay connected and refine their techniques without actually, being in the saddle or being with their horses. So yeah, it's been a good thing, I think, for people.
Yeah, for sure. For sure. And it's so interesting. So like, let's delve into, you showed the skull and the bones in the skull. So can you tell us a little bit, because I've heard a lot about how, like, when you have a noseband on a horse, let's say, and you put the noseband on real tight, and now you're asking the horse to flex, and that jaw doesn't have the ability to drop down in the way it needs to facilitate that, that flexion. Can you talk to us just like about things like that? I'd be real interested, and I'm sure the people listening would be real interested in how this all kind of fits together.
Yeah, so anatomically, what happens when the horse is, behind the vertical, or he's put into a position where he's not able to move his head upward, it stretches C1 and 2, right behind, so right at the connection of the head to the neck. And you can actually physically see a bulge right there when that stretches out. And a lot of people will refer to it as like, what is it? Broken at the third vertebra.
Yep, that's what you hear.
Is what I've heard. So yeah, that's probably one of the most visible things that you can see in terms of, when the head is down like that, and you can actually see it immediately. And if the horse stays in that position, it will become permanently, a permanent bulge. It can heal though, depending on, how severe it is, through the stretching, asking the horse to, lengthen his spine. But what happens is it doesn't, of course, stay in the poll. It causes tension in the mouth, and then that causes tension throughout the whole spine and in all the junctions throughout the body. So it, like you'd mentioned earlier, the connection from the mouth to the last vertebra in the tail. It's amazing because it can show up in the lumbar vertebra, which start to, bunch together, and they start to push up. So that's where we will start to see, the kissing spines in different parts of the back, or also affect the position of the pelvis too. So but of course, it's all there's multi-factors going on here, depending on how the horse is kept, how often he's moved, what kinds of exercises he does. Does he jump? Does he do dressage? Whatever. And how the rider, of course, does exercises. So everything plays into all of these things. But yeah, just going behind the vertical creates a trickle effect throughout the whole body. And that was our major issue for my horse when he came back. Some horses I don't think it's a breed thing. I think in a lot of cases it's a temperament thing. Some horses are more prone to want to be behind the vertical and kind of want, with quotes. Yeah. They're trying to find a comfortable position, whether that's away from the hands or away from the tool that's being used. And when my horse came back, he would only stay behind the vertical with his chin, not pinned to his chest, but he was holding himself back because he didn't want to feel that tension in his mouth. But of course, then it creates tension elsewhere. So getting him to just kind of poke his nose out took a year of, all sorts of different techniques and different things that I helped him with. But the biggest was walking relaxed with his head, allowing him to put his head where he wanted it, which was down. And because that's at the early stages when they're weak, they want to put their head down in the natural grazing position and just poke that nose out. But it takes a long time because they get nervous. They think they're going to hit something that hurts.
Think about horses and the chewing action of their jaw. You know how it comes down and it kind of grinds, and there's that slight lateral rotation as they chew. And think about a horse chewing, and then think about a flash noseband, or some people call them figure 8 or drop nosebands, right? So you put that on, so they can't chew, so they can't fully relaxed, because licking, we always talk about licking and chewing.
Yeah.
It's not just relaxation, that's the stomach juices, it's the like digestion, it's that relaxed state. And so people will clamp that mouth shut, and then their horse is perpetually stiff in the poll.
Defensive.
Defensive, right. And it's like you take that flash off and that noseband off, and the horse automatically, they start to kind of loosen up, and you get that chewing motion going again. Any thoughts on like the flash nosebands, the chewing, that type of thing?
Yeah, for sure. I agree. I'm not against using nosebands, but I am against using certain ones. And also, it's important not to put them on too tight, because, like you said, it prevents them from chewing, and their dog does move back from side to side because it's natural for them to have that grinding action with their mouth. It's the only way that they can move. And so if we're restricting that, they end up biting their tongue too. So if we put it on too tight, they'll actually pinch their tongue. And by restricting the tongue, actually it causes direct pain or discomfort into the horse's poll, which we've already talked about what happens. If the horse has discomfort in his poll, then, we're back to causing problems throughout the whole body of the horse. But yes, I ended up with my horse, same classic issue. Noseband was too tight. Didn't want to put a bit in his mouth. When I got him back, he would, bob his head up and down when he saw it and kind of hold his head up. He was tall. He was a 16-hand horse, and I'm only 4. It wasn't. It was pretty easy for him to get away from me. So I was like, well, this doesn't work. So we need to think of something else. I completely chucked the noseband, and there was no issue. I've had people tell me, well, you have to put the noseband on, otherwise he's going to grab the bit and run away, or whatever. Right. There's a whole list of possibilities, right? And okay, well, I'll take my chances. And so I checked the noseband, and of course, at first he experimented, right, with, I have freedom. Now what can I do with this freedom? And he only experimented for maybe a day or two. And he found out, well, he can chew, he could relax, he could, when he actually started to feel that relaxation, when he would put his head out, poke his nose out, and then he was a funny horse. He has a sort of a sense of humor. Some horses flap their ears, right? Well, he would flap his lips when he was relaxed. And I always thought it was funny because he'd get this relaxed look in his eyes, and then his lips would start relaxing, and then he'd start blowing air. But yeah, it started with removing the noseband, which, because they're really sensitive in their nose. The nasal bone is really thin, and there's a lot of nerves in there. So if we put it on really tight, then we're not only, causing discomfort up in that area of the nasal bone, but also under the chin, which also has a lot of nerves too, which is just the face is all a very sensitive place. You probably wouldn't want anybody to strap something, really tight onto your face.
With a metal bit in your mouth.
Yeah.
The metal, something desirable for anybody. Yeah.
What about moving back now? You talk about floppy ears, and I love it when a horse is soft and they're kind of they're sort of coming up and forward, and they're soft, kind of stretching a little bit, and you can pick them up in your hand, and you're walking, and their ears are flopping. They're so obviously they're relaxed, but some horses really flop their ears like a mule almost, right? Any thoughts on the ears and that sort of thing?
I think it's just by horse. It depends, because some horses, I like to observe, just sit and observe horses, and regardless of what the rider is doing, and just see how they respond. And some horses, even though they're tense, they'll flap their ears. So it's not always an indication of relaxation. For some of them it is. I always tell people, well, it's not one sign. It's a combination of 10 or 20 signs that the horse is relaxed. So does your horse soften his eyes and flop his ears? Then probably that's an indication for that horse. But if another horse is like his head's behind the vertical and his back is dropped, but he's flopping his ears, it's probably not a good indication. Observation is a huge thing, not only for understanding my horse, but also understanding how to sculpt. I use you take a couple of minutes to observe the living animal. It depends on what I'm teaching. Sometimes I do live sculpture as well. So I teach the students to observe the horse and then choose a composition. And we go through the sculpting process that way too. So we're kind of opening their eyes to the communication of the horse. How does he express his eyes? What's he doing with his tail when his eyes look like that? So connecting the front and the back and through the observation is a big part of it as well.
You're talking about the whole horse, you're
Mhm.
saying, and I like that because that's a good point that some horses I have a horse that she'll pop her lips a little bit,
Mhm.
actually quite a bit. She's younger. So anyway, I always perceive that to be tension, but the rest of her feels really great. And her
Yeah.
eyes are blinking
And she's
and
soft.
she's
And
soft. And I guess,
we've always been like, oh, if just that one thing would,
Mm.
if she could just get quiet enough, but maybe, maybe that's
and
something.
she'll do it without a bit as well.
Yeah,
But
oh, yeah.
maybe you're right that look at what the rest of the horse is saying. And for that
Mhm.
individual, perhaps that it doesn't mean tension for her.
Mhm.
But
It might mean maximum relaxation. So it's about observing the individual. A lot of times you get this idea of, kind of the idea of a box, right? This is what correct looks like, whereas correct looks different with everybody.
Right.
Every horse is a little bit different, even though we have a baseline, of course, right? It's not going to be like, what would be a good example? I don't know. We start with a baseline, but then, when we start getting into the details, each one is a little bit, different.
That's something that I think, every horse is so nuanced, and being
Right.
able to pull in the entire picture and take a look at it rather than just focusing on one individual thing is important. But just the ability to teach people to observe. And from the sounds of what you're talking about, it sounds like you've got such an amazing way to teach people to observe the whole horse. And then they're putting it into some work with their hands, working on feel, working on being quiet. But then I'm sure you have to have them observe again. So there's this constant like back and forth where
Mhm.
you're observing, you're working with your hands, you're
fun.
creating something, and then observing again. And that's riding.
Yes.
You say, okay, now what is my horse saying that I just told it? How did that feel to him? And then you change. And
Mhm.
riding horses is very much like sculpting.
It is. And
Mhm.
even the
And-
muscle tone, because, I'll tell students we'll experiment with muscle tone. So I'll say, sit like jello. So they're too loose, and then I'll say, sit like wood, and they're too stiff, and the horse will follow and slow down. And then I'll say, now sit like clay. And so we're finding ways to teach, muscle tone or to describe that, and working with clay, that would make perfect sense. And even somebody
Yeah.
grabbing clay and squeezing clay,
Yeah.
what a good teaching aid that is. So I think I don't know of anybody else that does this.
No.
I don't either.
So you're one of a kind.
Not directly related to riding.
Right.
Yeah.
And when I started searching for a healing process for my horse, I realized it was me. I needed to make the adjustments, and my best tool was sculpting.
Yeah.
So I have a question for you, and it's in regards to, I guess you'd call them horse riding simulators. So like at horse fairs, you'll have these things, and, I get it. It's data for feedback for the rider. So if I'm sitting heavy on one sit bone versus the other, or if I'm pushing on my left stirrup more, I get it. It's feedback for the rider, but to actually make a simulated horse, I don't know if they'll ever be able to do that, because the way they move and certain muscles stretch and certain muscles contract, and it's so dynamic that I don't think riding simulators, I think it'd be really hard to make one. So as an artist and a sculptor and somebody that rides horses, what are your thoughts on like the whole riding simulator thing? And is it possible to make one that would actually feel like a horse?
Right now, I don't know. I have never tried to make one, so I don't know. I think it's pretty cool. The data, I like data. I think it's pretty cool, the information that you can collect from it, but I don't know how much it helps in terms of applying to your riding. If you take maybe a rider that's completely unaware of their seat bones or the way that they're using their body, then yeah, I think it could be beneficial. But there's other ways also that, for instance, when I do clinics and I talk about rider position, for instance, and we do a self observation as well before starting to sculpt. And we do some exercises on terms of the way that you're sitting, or do you have good posture? Where are your seat bones? So if you're sitting on a hard surface, it's pretty easy to feel because it's uncomfortable. And if you put your hands under your bottom while you're sitting, you can feel your seat bones. So there's different ways of doing it. But I think it's a pretty cool idea. I think maybe as it develops, it might become more sophisticated. But simulating a horse, I think that's pretty complicated because they're very complex animals. And I'd be surprised if we could simulate something that was equal or at least close to equal because they're living creatures. Each one is a little bit different. They respond differently to each different person because every person is also different. Our energy, it really affects them too. So, which is something that a machine won't respond to. So yeah, I think there could be some great benefits to it, but I think there's also things that benefits to being with the horse that you can never get with a machine.
Yeah. Yeah. And I like, I'm kind of going back just a little bit, but I like how you said you realized that in order to help your horse, it came down to you. And I think that's a really important thing for people to understand is we have to be an educated advocate for our horses. And to become that, we need education, right? We need to learn more about them and learn about their body, their mind, because they're both so interconnected. To be able to communicate to the veterinarians, like you were speaking to earlier, you've got to have a general idea of what's going on because they're not going to exhibit the exact things in front of the vet that you're seeing on a day-to-day basis and that sort of thing. So, what would be some key areas people should kind of key into, some things that you see come up fairly regularly when assessing horses or when observing horses that you would encourage people to kind of look at and become real familiar with when working with their own horses so that they can see maybe potential problems coming up.
I would start by observing one's energy. Personally, how are you approaching your horse? Are you finding do you come away kind of feeling the same every time? And if that's a dissatisfaction, where that might be coming from? I talk about that a lot because usually when we're having a problem, it's because we're approaching the issue not in a way that's going to be helpful to the horse. So it's observing the horse. Some of the issues, I would say some of the biggest issues that come up, right, are just general tension with the horse. And then they're creatures of habit. So we teach them to be tense. They're just going to naturally be that way when we pull them out of their stall. And some days are going to be worse than others. And it's accumulative too, right? So if we don't release that tension, it eventually just becomes a ball of tension that's eventually going to. So starting from that idea of how can I make myself relax so that I can transfer that to my horse? And then I think once you start kind of pointing the finger back at yourself rather than at your horse, which is a hard thing to do because it takes it's a lot of work to really kind of peel away the layers and see yourself as it's hard, not that it's not a lack of honesty or whatever, but it's hard to kind of pinpoint what you need to work on. Sometimes other people are able to see that easier than yourself. Kind of having that mental picture or that idea of how I'm going to approach my horse so that I can help him relax is helpful because then you start to make these connections of how you can kind of prepare yourself or start your day with more relaxation and apply that to by the time that you get to your horse, you're not tense or you're not like you don't have the weight of the day on you.
Yeah, totally.
Right. And so I think it's kind of an abstract idea, but it's just so important to start from that idea of what am I transferring to my horse and what changes what can I do to be the most positive possible so that I'm not causing things that I don't want to cause in my riding or in my interaction.
I think that's fantastic. I mean, I think it does really boil down to where we're at emotionally, physically too, right? Because that emotional energy kind of creates what we are physically. And then understanding how much that affects the horse and how interesting coming from somebody that's teaching, the biomechanics, how all the pieces fit together, understanding the musculature, the skeletal anatomy of the horse. And here she is. What do we need to work on the most? And it's our own energy.
Because it's not about the mechanics, really. It's about understanding the mechanics so that we can understand ourselves. That just sounds so weird, but it's true because, I think anybody that works in anything comes to the conclusion that, oh, I need to work on myself. It's not out there. It's actually in here. And a lot of people think, oh, you're teaching anatomy, but I want to teach feel, or I want to teach, but like I said, we kind of start at a baseline. And if we can start at a baseline, we teach what we can see and what we can, build in this case, then we can move to the more abstract ideas of feel and energy. Because I think we start directly from feel. It's like, oh, it's more difficult because I remember when I was younger being taught to ride, and it's like, no, it's a feel. Understand this. And I was a little kid. So I'm like, okay, it feels fine. I just want to canter around and it feels fine to me. But so explaining it through like, well, these are the structures, and the reason you want to work on your feel is because then it affects the horse's back like this, making these connections. And of course, to me, it's kind of becomes difficult to explain it through words, but when you're starting to build it and you're transferring that and working with your horse, you start to go, oh, so if his back does that, that's what it feels like, right?
Right.
And it's not like I can say, yeah, it feels like X, Y, and Z, because it'll feel a little bit different if I'm working with my horse to, my 16-hand horse versus, somebody's 14-hand pony. And, so everything's gonna, it's all a little bit variable.
Yeah. No, that's really cool. And the slowing down and feel is taught, through your hands-on kinesthetic approach. You're creating a scenario. It's hard when people are just with their horses. It's them and their horse. Then you add an instructor. So now they've got this pressure of being on their horse, trying to interpret what's going on here, trying to listen to the instructor, trying to perform. Some people feel like that pressure to perform in front of their instructor. They want to show their instructor they're doing good and doing right. And so there's so much feedback that to develop feel in that space can be a little bit difficult for many. So in the environment that you're creating, really allowing them to slow down, it's bringing that energy to the place that they need to have their energy when they're riding. And then they're able to develop the feel. And then through that, you're also, I'm sure, talking about the understanding and how this all works together. And it's really intriguing. It's a really intriguing way of going about doing this. And I can see that it would be very effective for people to take one of your courses and go through this and really start to understand how all of these pieces fit together.
Definitely. I wonder if you took like high-end riders or whatever, equestrians, if you said sculpt a horse that you'd like to see. So like, let's pick on dressage. So you ask the Grand Prix rider, you say, sculpt the horse that you'd like to be on. And then you had them ride. And does that horse match their vision? Does that horse match the horse they sculpted?
Right.
Right. Now, obviously they're not going to be able to sculpt that, possibly be able to sculpt that well. But I'm trying to say, like, does the horse they're riding, does it match their vision? Or does it look like something completely different? Is the horse overflexed and gaping or whatever? You wouldn't sculpt that, right?
Yeah. Well, but you do see that in art.
I guess you do.
You do see that, overflexed horse with the gaping mouth, which is really too bad because it's not beautiful. I mean,
the thing about art is it's an expression of truth. So unfortunately, that's the truth that we have in the equestrian world. And it's sad because we see it a lot. And our artists, they don't know what they're sculpting or they're painting. They're just doing what they see. And unfortunately, that kind of comes back to the equestrian world. How well are we educating our riders and our students? But yeah, it's a shame.
Well, you see the resistance in there. And of course, a lot of arts is like, battles and stuff like that. So you see horses that are at war or in a stress state or And you're right. I guess, they are sculpting what they see or painting what they see. You're right. The truth is a lot of horses are stressed, and
Hmm.
that's done and resistance can't be beautiful. I'm kind of paraphrasing and that's
Yeah.
my version of the saying, but it's almost like if people could in their mind envision the softness in a horse that's really almost like play or curiosity, if they
Mhm.
could get that in their mind and now go ride,
Yeah.
I just
Yeah.
think that would help, that would change things a lot for horses.
Yeah.
It definitely would. I agree. And I like that you mentioned playfulness, because that's something when I started incorporating that with my horse, it really started to see that sparkle where he was just, excited. He was like, I could play, I can experiment. And then like, you start to get that communication, that back and forth communication. It's not just me telling him what to do. He's saying, well, let's try this. Could this work? And we'll be like, well, let's try it this way. And then you start to have that silent communication, which is really neat. And that goes back to learning the feel and learning to slow down.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. And so I'm sure we've got a bunch of people listening that would love to learn more about you and your work and what you do. So how can they get more involved with you and learn more about you?
Well, they could look up my website. I have two websites. DeannaMontero.com is where you can take the online courses for the sculpture anatomy. I also have sculptureanatomy.com if you want to learn more about the sculpting of the horse, just what it is, what it means. And yeah, I also have a Facebook page, Sculpt Equine Anatomy on Facebook. And I also have my Instagram. Well, same name.
Okay. Okay. So sculpture equine anatomy is what they want to. If they're going to Google something, that would be you're going to pull up on
That
Google.
would be, for the horse anatomy stuff. That would be, yeah.
Do you work with like bits and bitting and like with a clay horse, like a skull? Do you talk about bits at all with at your clinics?
I haven't done a whole lot. I mean, I mentioned that it's important to use a bit that is comfortable, and if you choose to use a bit, I suggest the French slink snaffle, just the loose ring, because I think it fits the mouths the best, and it creates the least amount of discomfort on the bars of the mouth. And you can get them with a flat link in the middle too, so it doesn't poke the mouth, doesn't poke the palate. Making sure that it fits, so I do talk about that. The discomfort or the comfort of a bit can help the horse be more relaxed throughout his body.
What is your YouTube channel? Just the name of it.
The same. Sculpture equine anatomy.
What else do you sculpt? What else do you do for? Because you said you're a professional sculptor.
I sculpt in bronze. Those are a couple bronze sculptures. But it's mostly horses. I'm actually right now working on a tutorial of the human figure. So this is something that's not up yet, and I haven't mentioned it publicly, but I'm working on tutorials on rider anatomy. So that then we can sculpt the horse and the rider together and see how two figures that are just so different come together. So it's but I don't professionally sculpt humans. It's mostly horses.
Do you take like chalk or paint and do you mark like a physical horse for people to see like the anatomy?
So what I like to do, and this is actually for my younger students. I did a collegiate clinic here at Stanford Equestrian last summer. I did 3 clinics, I think, for them. And what I did is I just got a bunch of paint. I had a big poster of the anatomy of the horse. It was I think 2 to 3 hour clinic, so we didn't have a lot of time. But we decided to paint the haunches, which is, a vital part of the movement, getting correct movement of the horse. And of course, they're very focused in competition. So we talked about, the health of the horse so that they're more competitive. But I took them and I told them to paint it onto the horse. So I didn't do it for them. So I said, okay, we're gonna paint the skeleton of the horse on, the haunches of the horse on directly onto the horse. And they're like, I'm not artistic. I can't do that. I've never done that before. They're all teenagers, right? And so it's like, it's okay. It doesn't have to be perfect. I just want you to give it a try, because when we give ourselves that freedom to try things, then we're less afraid and we can communicate better with our horses. So we get over that fear factor, which is a big contributor to injuries when we're riding, right?
Right.
Definitely.
And, getting over that through expressing themselves in the art and painting the skeleton on the horse. So we talked about that, and they had a lot of fun. They were like, "Hey, I can actually do it." I mean, of course, we had to cover some things up and fix some things and talk about if that bone was that shape, would the horse be able to move? And we're like, well, no, so let's go ahead and fix it. So it was really neat because they started to think about how the horse is structured and how he moves, and then also, kind of naturally getting over fear of failing because they're trying something that they've never tried before.
And you would think that people that ride horses, we need to be somewhat creative, and we need to have a vision of what we want from our horse and how we want our horse to go. And so by painting, it's like you're taking them to sort of the creative side of their mind, so that when they ride, maybe they're in that place versus, like you said, the worry, that block. Pretty much all of our presenters at the fair, we talk about that, slowing down and relaxing.
Yeah.
And not having fear as a blocker.
And I'm sure with the painting and with the sculpture, they're stepping away from it and then feeling empowered as well.
Right.
They're like, oh, look, I
actually
who
can
would
do
have
it.
thought?
Yeah, it's so cool.
Yeah, a lot of times people are really afraid to try things that are art related because I think that there's kind of a this idea of you have to create a masterpiece because if you're doing anything art related. And no, you actually just have to have fun. You need to enjoy the process, have fun with it, and every time you do it, you're going to get a little better.
Yeah,
awesome.
Totally. And that goes to the energy piece that you talked about earlier.
Right.
Our energy coming to our horses is so important. So if we're coming to our horses nervous and stressed and thinking we have to create this masterpiece, it's not going to be fun for either of us. But if we just go out there and we just want to have fun, and that's why kids and horses, they're not doing everything perfect.
One of the best.
Exactly. Right.
Yeah.
No, that's yeah.
Sorry, go ahead.
Well, no, that's such a good point though. And it's funny that, we come back to this and so hearing it from somebody like you, that's that creative artist type saying it. It's cool. It's refreshing. So we appreciate that.
Yeah, kids and horses are great, aren't they though?
Right.
Yes, they are. And I grew up with miniature horses, and we had a breeding farm. We had a little stallion and a bunch of brood mares. And the little stallion was funny. He was very difficult with my mom. But anytime any of us kids would do anything, he was perfect. He'd just stand. and because we were just, doing stuff. We were just having fun with him and we were relaxed. We didn't have any expectations for him. And I think maybe expectations are kind of what get in the way.
Yeah, I think you're right. His mom had minis as well.
She bred and she showed minis. And so in my teenage years, she had a few minis and we had some big horses. But then I'd say my 20s, she started breeding miniature horses. So she's like a Hall of Famer and everything.
Yeah.
So you hear about artists that they make like a painting or a sculpture, but to them, they don't like the way it looks. And so they'll put it aside. And then they'll come back to it and they'll say like, come back to it the next day or come back to it a few days later. Do you ever look at your own work and like question it, or do you have that happen at all?
Yes, a lot. And actually I incorporate that in the process of sculpting, assessing the quality of the work as I'm progressing. And I talk about that in the tutorials and the online courses. And it actually, the longer I've been sculpting, the better I'm at assessing my work in the moment rather than putting it away, covering it up and not looking at it for several days. I think it's actually, you get to the point where you've refined your eye and you can pinpoint things faster. But I think it's just a matter of, practice and fixing issues. And every sculptor, every artist has to go through that process of fine tuning. It's not like you do something perfect the first time. Every time you do something, you have to fine tune it. And it's the same as when you get on your horse, you have to warm him up and fine tune him and then get to quote unquote the fun stuff that, people are excited to do with their horses.
Yeah. And put them away and
Yeah. And then cool them down. Yeah. The whole process. It's the same with the sculptures. As I keep my sculptures on a lazy Susan so that I can turn them while I'm sculpting. So, because of course it's a 3-dimensional object. So you want to be able to put something on, look at it from every angle. And so I naturally put it on, turn it, put something on, turn it, or smooth it and turn it. And so it's a constant adjusting. There's constant adjustments that are happening throughout the process. And then of course I'll come back the next day and look at it and go, that elbow is a little bit higher than the other one, or that the head isn't exactly where I wanted it, or maybe my proportions are slightly off, so I'm going to fix it. And then you do that all the way through from the beginning to the end, and you get to the end and it's the way that you want it, right? Because you're making those adjustments all the way through. Yeah.
How do you keep your clay moist?
It's oil based. It doesn't dry, but it can actually reuse it. Yeah. I actually sell kits for my, and so they can reuse almost all of their materials except the armature that it's built on, which is aluminum. You can reuse it a little bit, maybe 2 or 3 times, but until it gets too flimsy and starts to break. But everything else, yeah, is reusable.
Well, good. Well, thank you so much for joining us here today.
Well, I'd just like to thank everybody for listening, and then also for this great opportunity to talk to you guys. I think it's wonderful to know that there's other equestrians that have the same kind of vision, and you're on a quest to help horses be more calm and relaxed. And of course, through that, we help riders be safer and enjoy the time they spend with their horses too. So, I just wanted to say thank you to you and everybody that's listening.
Thank you so much. And thank you to everybody who joined in today. Thanks for riding along with us. If you're finding these conversations meaningful, leave us a quick review and help bring more of this work into the world. If you'd like to take it deeper, head on over to becauseofthehorse.net. Grab a ticket to our free online horse fair, or check out our other learning paths and resources. Because of the Horse, I believe in better people, better horses, and a better world.